International Talk on Green Business, Sustainability, and Climate Action. It's such an honor to have you with us today. And for those of you who are in the United States, happy Thanksgiving. Thank you for joining us. And we have just a phenomenal lineup of speakers today. And we're just so happy to have you with us. And I want to thank Dr. Wissam and the Global Ambassadors of Sustainability for hosting this today and bringing us all together. As far as the team and what we're doing, I'm trying to click. We are focused, we as Global Green Chamber of Commerce are really engaged with the vision of Chamber of Commerce power, and there's probably over 20,000 globally chambers of commerce. But it's not just about the chambers of commerce, because we are looking at having chambers, green chambers in every part of the world to extend the vision to this new path to sustainability, which includes businesses, chambers, and academia. And with that, we invite each of you to join a council that we have, whether it be agriculture, energy, sustainable business. So please reach out. And we also have over 60 deans of sustainability from universities around the world. So we welcome those as well. And we also have a new webinar series that has already started, called the Global Forum on Academia Industry Partnership for Sustainability. So keep an eye out for those. And we are having an upcoming event in person in May and June, so of 2025. And at any point, feel free to reach out to me or Dr. Wissam. We want to hear from you. And so without further ado, I will pass this over to Dr. Wissam to do introductions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle, for this opening. And again to welcome all the panelists and the audience for this series of webinars. And today we will be having a few speakers, guest speakers. So we will start with the first speaker, Mr. Matthew Kazden. And Mr. Matthew, he's an international development specialist at Tangelic. And so the floor is yours, Mr. Matthew.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And for our guests in the US, again, happy Thanksgiving. So today I'm going to be presenting on policy action for a just future. As Dr. Wissam introduced me, my name is Matthew Kazden. I'm the International Development Specialist at Tangelic. At Tangelic, we're an organization that's committed to empowering communities to break free from the chains of energy poverty. We do this not only by working with communities, but also addressing that climate change is not just about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, but is also about advancing equity, resilience, and justice. Today, I'll explore the human face of climate change and look at policy action for a just future, with a special focus on the disproportionate impacts of climate change on marginalized populations and the urgent need for policies that prioritize justice and equity. So the devastating effects of climate change don't just affect one region or one facet of people's lives, but it's a domino effect that encompasses many aspects, from food security and sanitation to migration and economic activity. For example, take a flood that's been intensified due to the changing weather and patterns that have been worsened by climate change. A flood does far more than just affect property and bring in property damage. With flooding can also come worsened health impacts, such as increases in the spread of diseases. These changing rain patterns are expanding the range of mosquitoes, fleas, and ticks, which also means that diseases such as malaria, dengue, and Zika not only have a wider range, but also longer active periods due to warmer winters and longer summers as well. With flooding can also come disrupted food systems, which comes with the fluctuation in food availability and the resulting higher prices. This can be seen in, for example, the Horn of Africa, where swarms of locusts, bolstered by the rapidly changing temperatures, have decimated crops and driven food prices sky high. Or you could look in the Pacific Islands, where the increased temperatures and sea level rises have threatened coral reefs and coastal fisheries, which also increases tensions over the diminished food supplies. We could also see damage to ecosystems, as well as on the economic side of things, where flooding limits how much a worker can do, thus affecting the productivity of an economy. All of these, plus many more, end up leading to larger death tolls and increased suffering. Since climate change is an immediate and harsh reality, especially for those least responsible for the emissions, yet are the ones most vulnerable to its impacts, the inequalities between the global north and the global south deepen suffering. As wealthier nations that contribute largely to the emissions have the resources to better adapt, poorer countries are pushed deeper into poverty. This is also further intensified by historical legacies and limited access to resources. From farmers in the Sahel to the coastal communities throughout the Pacific, the effects of climate change exacerbate inequality, destabilize livelihoods, and undermine human rights as well. Amid these worsening environmental stresses, the World Bank predicts that by 2030, just about 5 short years away, 44 million more people will be pushed into extreme poverty than any other effect, and more than half these will be in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia alone. Other factors caused by climate change, such as damaged farmland, rising food prices, and hunger that was previously discussed, and political or social exclusion can also contribute to unrest. This, in turn, acts as a threat multiplier in escalating social and political instability and conflict. This can be seen in the role that a drier climate, amongst other variables, played in conflicts in Syria and Sudan. Climate change also acts as an additional stressor in regions that are already struggling with poor governance and insufficient investment in essential areas such as education, healthcare, and the rule of law. It's also contributed to more than 20 million people having to leave their homes and move to other areas in their countries due to hazards resulting from extreme weather events. The other side of governance challenge, or one of the many sides, and another important variable that must be brought up is that of weak governance structures and corruption. Weak governance, corruption, and abuses of power can worsen climate degradation, climate justice efforts, and human rights as well. This alliance that we've seen time and time and again between private power and inadequate oversight harms the environment and vulnerable communities, which amplifies the neglect and the regulatory failure. This combination does a few things. It exerts improper influence and undermines the policymaking process. It also allows companies and individuals to secure license through improper means, which can allow payoff to ensure that these companies are not held responsible for their damage, be it the climate damage or the human rights abuses that could stem from that. It also increases the odds of extortion of different workers and communities, which again, thus affects the human rights. These variables can also create incentives for environmental destruction with both direct and indirect impacts. On one hand, we have direct impacts such as deforestation or release of toxins in water systems from mining activities and other activities such as that. However, on the other hand, we have indirect impacts, which could be that these activities bring in finances for militia or organized crime groups that continually perpetuate environmental crimes as well as human rights abuses. A few other obstacles that must be overcome also include the lack of transparency and inclusion in climate negotiation and planning, as well as financial and technical support differences. However, amidst all these challenges, there is hope. Collective action, grassroots mobilization, and innovative policy solutions offer opportunities to address these systemic inequalities and pave the way forward for transformative change. By incorporating the needs and voices of these vulnerable communities into policy and legislation, we can create policies and actions that ensure a future that's not just sustainable, but equitable and just as well. In order to create this strong positive impact, it's vital to address this issue through effective policy, as policy, along with its resulting laws and enforcement, is the most powerful means to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels at scale. In terms of advancing climate justice, policy action can do a few things. It could address systemic inequalities and provide targeted support and ensure equitable distribution of resources. Policy can also direct investments towards the most vulnerable areas. Through this, the government can prioritize funding for adaptation projects in regions most susceptible to climate impacts, such as coastal communities facing rising sea levels, which would enable them to build resilience and protect their livelihoods as well. It can also work on implementation, we could also implement regulation and carbon pricing, which can incentivize businesses to transition to cleaner energy sources while generating revenue that can be reinvested in green technologies and community support programs as well. Policy can also promote social equity, or we could also work to promote social equity in climate policies. And this would work to ensure that the benefits of climate action reach all communities, including those that have been historically marginalized throughout. While there are many potential policy solutions that can further climate justice, assist vulnerable groups and communities, as well as reduce emissions, a few of which include renewable energy investment. This would also help communities without connection to the grid gain access, thus further reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's also important to invest in climate adaptation, as well as offer financial assistance to the global south and these vulnerable countries, groups, and different regions. Another policy solution would also be to practice increased sustainable agriculture and land management, as well as strengthening social safety nets. However, this is a lot easier said than done due to domestic politics, changing administrations, and geopolitics throughout the world. These variables and more can complicate the necessary and effective policies. However, amongst changing governments and geopolitics worldwide, one thing that's necessary is perpetual advocacy. Advocacy and collective action also mobilizes communities and brings attention to these social problems. So kind of zooming in on a smaller scale, looking at what you can do as an individual or community, there's a few things they would really help this. One can be simply support the policy change and these climate justice initiatives, as well as showing support to a lot of different grassroots organizations and NGOs that are out there that are working to not only advocate for climate justice, but are working on the ground with the communities and people that are most severely affected by the effects of climate change. There's also an important variable, which is pushing for corporate accountability in the supply chains, as well as advocating for renewable energy investments from the global north into the global south. So looking forward, the fight for climate justice is the fight for our deeply intertwined faiths and our shared humanity. As we fight to protect our planet, we must also fight equally as hard to protect the rights of all its people. Together, through collective action and bold policy reform, we can ensure that the voices of the most vulnerable are not only heard, but empowered to lead us into a just and sustainable future. Thank you.
Did we lose Dr. Wissam?
It seems like maybe we should just proceed in the agenda.
Yes. Let's see, the next speaker, and maybe if you can take off this last slide, and so then the next speaker can share their presentation.
I think he's sharing his screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's see. I don't know if there's a workaround here.
I'm trying to share now. Maybe it works.
Yes, and I think because we lost Dr. Wassam, and he's the one that does control the screen share. Oh, he's back.
I'm sorry. I was disconnected for a while. So, Mr. Andreas?
Yes.
Yeah. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you also for having me here, and a good day to the audience online, and greetings to my fellow panelists and ambassadors of sustainability. I prepared a couple of slides based on my 25 years experience in working on sustainability in a multi-sector setting. And I still remember when I was a student worker that by chance sneaked into BASF. It was 2 years after the Rio conference in 1992, where some people came back and said, well, that was full of NGOs, but they had a point. It was all about economical, social, and environment coming together in a long-term perspective. And we as chemical industry see that point. And I was fairly surprised because I thought like these corporate people are just ignorant of social or environment in the mid-90s, but it changed. It changed a lot. So looking back, I distilled a little bit my personal experience and principles on sustainability innovation. I think we need innovation. It's no more business as usual, as it has been said. 5 years to the SDG showdown, and this brings me forward to a short introduction. I think I've done most of that. You see me there with a gentleman I've met twice in my life. First at the UN Global Compact meeting when it was founded, and then 17 years later, you can read the story on LinkedIn, what I did in between. I worked with the Gates Foundation. I worked with government and also nonprofits and philanthropy, and that brings me now in the position to advise on investments, partnerships, and impact specifically, but not limited in food, nutrition, and agriculture and health. If we look at the whole agenda in food, agriculture, nutrition, and health, there's this concept of One Health. There is, climate sending shocks into the food system creating emissions in terms of climate change, contributing to. So we have a repercussion in the system. And if we want to achieve SDG 2, zero hunger, which we unfortunately lost like 10 years of progress due to the pandemic, we have to see this in an interconnected way. We have to see the interfaces between biodiversity, food, nutrition, and also climate and economy. At the end of the day, agriculture and food is a primary sector for many of the economies. So I tried to specifically put a business lens on these challenges, and you could see a lot of potential if you want to be an optimist in 10 billion people to be fed. We have 2 billion people being overweight. We have a lot of elderly people in the developed world. And we waste still a third of our food just to make up a couple of these challenges. But these challenges are also opportunities. If there just would be a great business case to end climate change or mitigate malnutrition, somebody would have done it. So nevertheless, I think there's optimism in terms of new themes coming up. That constitute a business case and a first mover advantage, like circular food concepts. I've worked, as I said, in chemical industry. There's hardly any waste in a sustainable chemistry production. You use byproducts, like also in the food chain, and produce energy from that, or produce feed from it, or even produce food for it, or upcycle something that would have been waste, like you can do with digital tools nowadays. So there's a good deal of new trends, start and scale-ups are tackling, which constitute as such maybe an opportunity for an actor in, for example, the developing world. Often it is a market failure. So if you emit CO2, nobody will adequately price you unless you are in a mandatory scheme. if you waste your food, it doesn't reflect the true cost. If you produce obesity with food which is not healthy, nobody will charge you the health system costs at the end of the day. So we need blended finance. We need collaboration across sectors. We need investment of public entities and public good providers and make business part of the solution. At the same time, we need businesses and also investors which are believing in solutions being multi-sectoral and investing in that sweet spot of blended finance. And the good news is a lot of ideology faded, and I think there's much more room for multi-sectoral collaboration and alliances and market building than it has been 10 or 15 years ago. There's a lot of good instruments like the food system pathways. The pathways are what the countries committed in 2021. What is their way to a sustainable food system? What are the crops? What are the themes? What is the R&D that is needed? What is the government priorities? What should be the donors' priorities in that area? So there's a lot of healthy underutilized crops. There's a lot of business momentum locally in utilizing these crops. There's a lot of potential value chains that could come together in partnerships like the one I've brought here, which is a bilateral alliance with GIZ and a couple of other companies and nonprofits. USAID also has a very strong food stream. And often it's like the implementation of a technical capacity stream with business, where they bring unique perspectives, competencies, and investments in making things happen at the country level, whereas the policy level, the standard setting level, is something for the nonprofit sector, for bilateral donors, for the government, last not least. So, however, it needs often both. It's not just policies changing things, it's often innovation, technical solutions, it's products. So at the end of the day, products can also be something that really starts from the rural level. And one of the projects I'm advising is in Guatemala, reinventing the global peanut butter food aid export. And it's great that the US exports a lot of peanut butter to help the world, but it's even better if you do it locally. And if you do it locally, speak to your communities, go to the unconventional channels, and create your impact metrics. So if you do business and you want to do good and you want to marry it, there's different layers. These layers could be forming partnerships, that could be new products, that could be the application of these products in a sustainable setting, innovative plant protection products, breedings of drought-resistant crops, for example. And then it needs a shared value business model where market co-shapers, co-investors come in and the company walks extra miles to fix a problem which is not just a consumer problem. It often helps if you look along the value chain and you understand there is often a supply chain and a delivery chain involved. So a product locally produced sometimes needs nutrition in it, sometimes or always needs to be safe. It needs to be brought out. Is it just the supermarket chains? Is there other channels? Is there public infrastructure like hospitals and primary healthcare? So there's a lot of considerations to be done in the strategy, which typically my clients co-create with me. And well, digital is a very important component, and that looks like a complex use case, and it is. It's a digitized quality assurance in nutritious food production. In pharmaceuticals, you also find track and trace models, for example, that make sure what's on the label is also inside. And sometimes you can also trace the sustainability factors of a food. Finally, before I conclude, I'm a great fan of quantitative tools. So the more we get Internet of Things, or should I say a couple of sensors and Wi-Fi in the production, there's beautiful opportunities for collecting data on energy use, collecting data on water use, collecting data on waste, collecting data on traceable ingredients you put in, like iron for women in certain foods. You want to make sure it's in there, and you want to make sure your investment is assessed in the right manner. So typically these kind of matrix tools where management could be taken along in the sense of that's my footprint, that's my positive footprint. You can also do kind of your a carbon footprint, but you can also do an impact footprint. And then I think if you take such a decision strategically, it's much easier to be implemented by the executive team of a company. That was quite, I would say, a rundown on a couple of dimensions of these sustainability innovations, partnerships, ecosystems. I've done that for several sectors and with several sectors. And I'm looking forward to be contacted on LinkedIn if you have questions, if you have project ideas. And thanks so much for having me. I hope that was a bit of an inspiration.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Andreas, for the enlightening presentation. And I think now we move to the next speaker, Dr. Victoria Coilo. And Dr. Victoria, she's Associated Professor at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So, Dr. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, I will try to share presentation. Yes, you see it. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this initiative, Dr. Rassam. And it's interesting because just Andreas presented his vision, what they work, and I found so many similarities. And it's nice to introduce it from maritime perspective, from another perspective. But we work with similar things. So green in business, maritime case. So a bit of current challenges, main driving forces, maritime case, and again about business models, what kind of business models we work with. Yes, unfortunately, we are in this time, as we call it, polycrisis. We face with lots of things like supply chain disruptions, the war, energy crisis, inflation, and it's hard. Someone can say that it's hard to invest in climate action. And if you see, so it's true, when there is this case about Red Sea, so it takes long distance to travel for ship, and it's more emissions, of course. The war in Ukraine, of course, it's energy cost, we know, it's, but also there is statistics that during these 2 years of the war, in this region, when it comes to greenhouse emissions, it's equivalent to the same amount that 175 countries can do it due to the situation, to actions what happens in this region. But also there is interesting fact about offshore wind. It was industry where everyone put lots of emphasis, and mainly European countries, but nowadays due to delays in projects and lots of costs, it needed a lot of support from government. It's industry which have some obstacles, and we see the tendency that even offshore industry is coming back due to, again, price of energy. When it comes to investment, so just recently finished COP29, and we've heard about challenges that it was hard to agree on price. What kind of amount of investment should countries in emerging countries should get, and in the end they agreed on 300 billion, and it's believed that it's not enough. So mainly it's due to that the economic growth in developed countries, it's not that positive as it expected. For example, due to, according to this report from Mario Draghi, there is some stagnative process in EU, especially it's due to productivity gap, and productivity is not that efficient anymore, and there is huge, if you see, there is huge gap between USA and EU. Shortly, we live in this period of VUCA world. When it comes to VUCA, it's volatility, uncertainty. It's but there is, in every crisis there is possibilities, so we have to look for them. And again, according to this report, we have 3 transformations ahead, and mainly technology is a key point here. So investment, innovation in new growth engines like digitalization, it's in priority. Decarbonization, circular economy, it's still our main priorities, and resilience. We should build resilience to be more resistant to these geopolitical shocks that all the time comes. Shortly, a little bit about how technology actually helps for economic growth, for productivity. There is this well-known Cobb-Douglas production function. It's mainly about relationship input and output, how we use those input factors like capital, labor, in order to produce output, so GDP. So if we just increase capital per labor, so it's this effect. But due to this technology, so we can have a much better output. When it comes to this driving force technology, how it impacts the company cycle. So as we know, there is emergency, growth, maturity, decline stage in every business, in every industry. So what helps us to go back to, again, to the growth stage, it can be, again, technology. And to present how it works in maritime, because we work for maritime department and it's something that I work every day. It's nice to present. And also in Norway, shipping is the most shipping is very important. Maritime industry is important. With one of the longest coastline, it was all the time important industry for Norway. And Norway in the top 5 when it comes to fleet size in value. And maritime industry is a catalyst for the green transition, because 97 companies, shipping companies, have already invested in climate and environmental technology. And lots of companies plan to do it in future. So it's something that happens in industry. And very interesting to share with you with this case. So about maritime cluster, because it's where we live, northwest, where we work, and we say that we have the most complete maritime cluster in this region. We have everything from design phase, shipbuilding, shipping, so equipment providers, but we mainly been fishing cluster before, and the oil and gas extraction in 1869. Then it started to be concentrated on offshore vessels. But due to 2013 collapse in oil price, we should change priorities. So then we moved to cruise industry, tourism, but again, Corona, lockdown, so it was not profitable industry. So another solution was to go to offshore industry. And now after the war, that happened, so it's about defense. So we also build products for NATO nowadays in this region. And as you see, due to different challenges, really maritime is very cyclical. So we have all the time different shocks. But due to the adaptability, diversity, cluster could be resilient. And we can see on the portfolio of revenue of the cluster, we see it changed a lot, like offshore and gas 32%, offshore and gas 15% now, yachts and cruises were 30% of the portfolio, now it's 13%. So it changes all the time. So industry can adapt to realities. And also another reason of the success, it's ecosystem. Because in order to create new things, technology, you have to have a good innovative ecosystem. There is this 5 components of stakeholder systems. So we have everything in our region. And the university play a crucial role in order to test new technologies, to collaborate with industry. We call ourselves the most close to industry campus in Norway, one of the most, because really we have lots of projects with industry where we test and collaborate. But when it comes to technology, greening of business, it's not only about to implement new technology, it's how to use them also. So new business models are needed. And some companies, and these green business models, it means that you have to capture both economic value, but also to reduce ecological footprint. And importantly, that it's from the whole life cycle perspective. Some companies can allow just invest in new input, in green inputs. Some produce green outputs. Some prefer to transform process that it will be more less energy intensive, less resource intensive. But some companies also facilitate changes of consumption template. So to force customers to buy the product that is more environmentally friendly, and of course it's to facilitate to have less those externalities that we don't want, like green gas emission, waste. And here is an example of different business models that can be implemented in the whole life cycle in maritime supply chain, and different business models that can be used. So as you see, there are 5 different business models and different sub-models. But here it's important to have also some partners, like full ecosystem, like financial organizations, technological providers, public sector, research institutions, in order to make it work, those technologies. And I would like to share with you a maritime case from our industry. There is shipyard, Greenyard Klaven we call, in the northwest of Norway, and it's a shipyard that serves the whole life cycle of the vessel. So they do building of ships, maintenance of ships, recycling, but also retrofitting, so upcycling. And when it comes to savings, so very interesting case about upcycling. So there is this case where they had the task to recycle the ship, and the steel was used for another industry. So what upcycling means, that the product from one industry can be used in another industry. So it was used for building of park, new water park in Oslo, the steel from the old ship Nordmannborg. And they also calculated how much CO2 on steel that's saved, so less emissions happened. So it was just by using steel from old ship, so it was 91-94% of savings. So shortly, yes, we really live in this VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, but we still can do we can still combat this climate challenges. And the technology here important, crucial. I presented on the case of maritime that it's really also the sector where lots of cycles up and down, but it's still industry that shows that it's possible to be flexible, risk-taking, and collaborative. Ecosystem is very important here. And when it comes to new technologies, it changes business, the way how it works. It changes the network and business models. So it means that you should be adaptive to the challenges that comes. And maritime industry shows that it's possible. Yeah. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, just you can contact me and send me by our LinkedIn or email. Yeah, I will be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Victoria, for your presentation. And I think now we start the Q&A session, and I hand it over to Michelle.
Yes, thank you so much. I know Matthew has to leave shortly, so I'll ask a couple of questions to you, Matthew. The first one just came in, and it is from Mr. Fernandez, and the question is, it is a common speech to connect law enforcement and financial assistance when discussing sustainable development. How do we promote it when developed countries, Europeans, for example, apply protectionist issues to the detriment of production in developing countries?
Thank you for the question. And yes, I am Sorry, I do have to cut the Q&A a bit short as I have some Thanksgiving travel plans. But to the question, how do you promote developed countries? I think it's important to highlight the negative economic impacts for global trade in general when it comes to, as you mentioned, Europeans and their protectionist policies. Because I think with this issue in particular, we all kind of have to sacrifice a little for the greater good. As I said before, it in the end will affect global trade, but again, I think for the greater good, it's necessary.
Yeah, thank you so much. And while you're here, this is going to be to everyone, but if you had to suggest one key policy change that could globally accelerate climate action, what would it be? Great question.
I can come in here. My personal wish would be a global functioning CO2 trading system. So a scheme that captures emissions you save, that has a baseline, endline, and validation scheme that's universally accepted. There's no loopholes, there's no fraud, and this would be 100% implemented with the major emitters, and there would be an incentive to really make it market-based, make it something everyone can work on for a benefit individually and globally. That would be awesome.
Yeah, great answer. And who would like to go next on that answer? Matthew, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I can hop in.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you broke up for a quick sec. Do you mind repeating the question for me?
Yeah, sorry about that. Let's see. If you had to suggest one key policy change that could globally accelerate climate action, what would it be?
That's a good question. I'd say largely increasing the investment in green technology across the board.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for putting that up there, Dr. Bassam. And any other ideas?
I could add there as well. I think the diversification is very important here because when we invest too much in one area, for example, renewables and wind energy, for example, and just today it was presentation about energy transition of Norway, and we found that it should be in combination with other sources, and offshore still is here, and we can't resist to it oil and gas. And in order to reach the goals, I think it should be in combination. And because when it comes to investments, we see that it's wind energy needs lots of governmental support, and there are lots of discussions here. So I really believe that it should be done wise, and not to stop to go away from, yes, it's a brown industry, we have to take away from it, and just blue industry, just green transition. It can't be done until 2050 if we will not do it gradually, step by step. Yeah, so it should be done in diversification and gradually.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that answer. And this one is specific to Andreas. What innovative financing mechanisms, such as green bonds or carbon credits, are the most effective for scaling green business models? And how can cross-industry partnerships amplify the impact of sustainable initiatives?
Well, thanks. Great question. Very practical. How can I do that? I have a technology, I have a patent. I want to kind of build a business. I want to market it. And every case is different. And every entrepreneur's business, every sector can be different. So if you are sitting in a university, you want to get to a patent, you want to kind of get your basic research financed, there's as there's donors like government or scientific philanthropies that might wish to fund it, like the Gates Foundation in health, for example, or climate. There is venture capitalists, there's other forms of equity if you want to scale a business. If you want to have a hybrid model where you have maybe a philanthropic arm, you partner with the foundation, still you want to be a business, then it's probably you can stand on two legs. If it comes to downstream delivery, you can partner with nonprofits that bridge the last mile, that have like TechnoServe, for example, programs in slums. You can distribute food products. You can, like I do in Senegal, support an organization that, for example, does multi-stakeholder governance in renewables. So there's investment in renewable solar power in rural areas. As you know, electricity is very key for anything, starting with education, going over agriculture. And if there's multi-sector governance and the benefits of electrification, decentralized electrification, is then shared. LEAP, for example, is a model that you can partner as a provider of technical support, electrify rural areas, and make sure electrification benefits the community and not just single people in that village. So there's, I think, often a need for a strategy like 5 to 10 pages, co-creation. What is my stakeholder radar? What is my ecosystem? Who do I need to partner? What is my gap? I mean, partnerships is not a means; it's is a means, not an end. So, what can I do in terms of an affordable energy transition in a certain area? What do I need? Am I big enough and formal enough to go for carbon credits and do a certification scheme, hire someone to do that for me? I've worked with a large Colombian food producer in the fruit business. There's a lot of fruit that goes to waste in a seasonal approach. That could be big enough to have a baseline and end line, build a powder factory, powdering bananas, making banana powder, and make food out of that. But this is all early stage. It depends also on the country you are working in. Is there a credible scheme that captures carbon credits and make them investable? And is it for any given project a worthwhile investment? As we know, the carbon price has been higher, but case by case, I would say.
Thank you so much. Really important global perspective on that as well. So, and I know we have a lot of questions coming in. I'll go back to one that's for both of you here, which is from Indira, which is, what does a perfect balance between economic growth, sustainability, and environmental preservation look like to you?
Yeah, I can answer the question. Thank you very much for, it's very relevant because in my early research career, it was my first question: economic growth is good for sustainability or no? Because it was period when everyone was telling we should calm down our economic growth. It's not good for environment. But as we see, as I presented, that the COP29 shows we need money, we need investment, we need support from advanced countries. But also, maybe someone heard about this environmental Kuznets curve. There is this good explanation that is it good for sustainability or no. So in the beginning, when you just increase your production, you reach the turning point where CO2 increases. So because it's manufacturing, it's productivity, so you produce. But then after you reach some point, when you still continue to your economic growth, GDP grows, but CO2 goes down. I did this research, and really it's applicable for all advanced countries, but it's still not applicable for countries in emerging economy. Why? Because when you've got some level of economy, you can invest. You can invest in environmentally friendly technologies, so then you can reduce your CO2 footprint. So basically, it's very important to check this situation with relevant indicators. sustainable indicators. So you will have set of economic, social, and environmental indicators, and you will trace the situation in which sector have downturns, which is super good, and to take eye on those indicators that are on decline. So there should be balance. I really agree that it should be both profit people and planet. Yes, so all 3P should be taken into consideration, and just to trace the development of all these parameters, and to keep eye on them. And of course, it's very important to find the most ones that will be suitable to answer on sustainability. So, yeah.
Thank you, Victoria. I want to say, as a Green Chamber of Commerce, this is the question that always comes up, and that was just the perfect answer. And Andreas?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I have a small follow-up perspective, but largely agree. I think it starts with understanding it is a balance and being committed to quantify and look for synergies and understand, well, if I can optimize my benefits economically, environmentally, biodiversity-wise, and even community-wise, and then this is the optimal solution. Why not aiming for green growth while protecting the climate? Why not conserving through use and making the Colombian rainforest a source of nutritious ingredients smallholders can produce? So I think often it starts with the commitment to say, hey, I want to understand how much growth or how much cost does that produce? How much footprint do I generate on the environmental side? And then seeing, well, is it a large trade-off? If it's a trade-off, can I drill deeper? And there's even multiple perspectives to see then, can I come to synergies with more R&D or more investment and optimizing this quantified view in terms of that footprint and database perspective is a strategic journey. And if you just do that without committing, say, well, this indicator and this indicator always need to be a third, I think, again, it's case by case, country by country, organization by organization. And largely, businesses might quantify the economic dimension a bit more than an environmental NGO. But doing this is always a good reason to come together and discuss numbers, discuss data, and discuss opportunities to synergize in an area which then is applied sustainability.
Thank you. And talking about the data, this question is asked, as this discussion is going on, I want to ask about the depreciation of solar panels is 25 to 30 years. Is there any technology for it that these may increase to more than 30 years? And second question is, the financing model, is it based on the best PPA? So guide us on what equities we should offer to our financier with payback plan.
Well, let me try to give an answer from a very high level, which I think investing in long-lasting goods, in particular if you buy and kind of build a solar power field, it's probably long-lasting goods will show you that they have the lesser footprint and are probably financially a good investment. When it comes to the form of financing, there's multiple models in the energy production area, but this is, I think, so country-specific with the respective grants and subsidies that are possible. And even in Europe, we have kind of deals that if you install additional solar power, you can kind of have a guaranteed price for putting that back in the grid. So that's, again, a case-by-case assessment I would do with someone specialized from the energy sector. It's a wide field of expertise.
And Victoria, do you have any thoughts, or do you want me to go to the next question?
I want to say from the perspective of Norway, there is not main discussion about solar, but mainly about wind turbines. And it's something similar to this question, because there is also what will happen after the lifetime of these turbines, how we will utilize them. And there are lots of questions around this thing. So as you say, it should be taken in consideration the whole life cycle of assets. Yes, when you do investment in something, so it's question to politics. Yes, it's a very political question.
Thank you. And I know some questions are coming in that are really, really specific as far as numbers. So I'm going to go to a more general question that came in. I'm going to ask, in your view, which is more pressing, ethical accountability among governments or among corporations, and why?
I think it's everything starts from bottom up, from local level, from companies. So we really have this tendency where this ESG, yes, new reporting things from EU, it's quite important. Everyone is talking nowadays here in maritime, and we have even a special cluster events directly for this sustainability reporting to teach companies that in the cluster how to do it in a correct way. So there are lots of activities around these things, and also why it started to be relevant, because those new scope 3 which came into force this year also showed that you have to look on your emissions from the whole life cycle perspective, from upstream and downstream, and as far as the cluster have the most complete supply chain we say we have, so everyone knows each other, so the customer, the supplier, so it's easier to work together on these things, and even this shipyard that I showed you on the slide, they also work with these ESG things, with reportings, and it's quite high importance. I think it should be first of all started on everything starts from us, as we say, yes. So this on the country, on the company level and corporate.
Thank you, Victoria. Andreas?
I agree. It's both. I think government and business have their fair share of being part of the solution to anything that is considered an ethical problem. I personally think you need to break it down to, is it a human rights, is it a food problem, is it a health problem, then frame it in a regulatory way that it's clear, that it's understandable, bring it into an industry norm if you can, put people on it that kind of build the capacity and monitor it, listen to businesses, how can you make it more efficient at the end of the day, and then it's a good regulation, a good market framework, I would say a good supply chain that has been co-shaped by different actors. Academia coming in, giving science and data background, what is really necessary, and local communities. I mean, I've rarely seen anything that has been crafted in Europe or in Washington that really is one-to-one applicable in Kenya, Tanzania, or Mozambique, or in Asia. So I think it needs co-ownership on different layers, as it has been said before.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's why we do this particular program, is really focusing on bringing those different components together. So the academia part is really important. Another question is, one of the most critical factors affecting the progress towards sustainability is that of corruption, which is negatively impacting the progress. So is that something that you're seeing? And then maybe what would be some solutions that you can identify or that you've learned about?
I can be quick because I also have to run it in a minute. But the UN Global Compact introduced the 10th principle after a while of 9 principles, because they saw that neither government nor business will function across the board if there's corruption. And it's a systemic issue, but not the only one that holds us back from the sustainability goals. But you can look at corruption indices. In some countries, it's more problem than in others, but I wouldn't kind of say there's any country that should ignore that problem.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us too so much. We really appreciate it.
No, thanks, Michelle, and also to Saversam and Victoria. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
See you
Thank
soon.
you,
and hopefully
Andreas.
more. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Andreas. And Victoria, if you would like to answer that last question, and then we can close out the session.
I can answer. And I want to say that I am Ukrainian, and everyone knows that about this corruption things, and usually they talk about Eastern European countries. But as was mentioned by Andreas, it depends on country level. But I want to say corruption exists everywhere, in every country, but we call it differently, and on different levels it is exists. And from perspective how it happens nowadays, yes, we fight with it, for example, and because the most important that society wants to be sustainable, wants to have better living conditions. So lots of things done on the government level. But as we say, everything starts from us again, because if every person in this country will stop to give money to be better served in at hospital, at the university, or where it's in different countries, different problems, yes. So everything starts from person, and of course important to have those monitoring institutions that will control it, but very important that those institutions do appropriate job, so it should be also checked and traced. Yeah, so both, I think government and people have to work together by fighting it. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And I want to say thank you so much to all of the speakers today. We are in the middle of a holiday, so we've had, some of the speakers that have had to leave. And I want to say thank you to all of the participants who have come in to ask really thoughtful questions. This is such a great platform that we're using, and just a huge thank you to Dr. Wissam for bringing us all together again, and the Global Ambassadors of Sustainability. And I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Wissam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michelle, and special thanks to the speakers, Dr. Victoria, Dr. Andreas, and Mr. Matthew, for the enriching discussions. And maybe I just wanted to comment on the idea brought by Dr. Victoria about the economic growth. And I think I fully agree with that. And this is, again, as you mentioned, that this is based on research finding that we have. If we want to really make sustainability as a practice, so we have to be realistic. So we have, and this is the basic concept of sustainability, to balance the economic growth with the environmental protection and social sustainability as well. Because what we've seen previously, we can't be too idealistic, where always talking with a flowery image of environmental protection with the negative impact of the economic growth. But you have to maintain that, as you mentioned. If you want to invest in green technology, you need investment, and that is if you have that you afford to invest. Otherwise, it's not only investment in green technology, but also in the social aspects. You will face troubles in the social aspects as well. So we have to, that sustainable practices, sustainable lifestyle, it's about balancing the economic growth with the environmental protection. And I think we have great, currently we have great technology, we have great tools as well, which is when we talk about environmental impact assessment for the activities, for the projects, for the initiatives. So that is the basic for all these economic activities to be environmental friendly, to be assessed, and for the mitigation measures to be proposed and implemented, so that the sustainability will convert to be a practice. In parallel, we are talking about the education, the environmental education, environmental awareness, raising the awareness of people about protection of the environment. And that is in parallel when we talk about sustainable production and sustainable consumption. So it is two wings that have to be maintained. And then we can talk about, converting all these discussions to practical steps in our life, in our daily activities. So again, thank you so much, Michelle, for co-moderating this session. And definitely we will see you again in the next webinar, which will be on the 18th of December. We will have, again, several guest speakers, and we try to bring people from academia, from industry, NGOs to share those enriching ideas to contribute to raising the awareness and also bringing the networking among those institutes for collaborating on achieving sustainability. So thank you so much, and happy holidays for those who are celebrating, and have a good day, everyone, and good times.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.